Broadcasting from the KMF Collective Studio, it's time for the Keep Moving Forward podcast. Join us every week as we dive into the stories of remarkable current and former athletes that have transitioned into the real world. Now here's your host, Katie Galley.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the 228th episode of the Keep Moving Forward podcast. I'm your host, Katie Galley. In the KMF Collective Studio with me today, I have founder of Sebastian Little Performance and former collegiate football player, Sebastian Little. How are you doing, Sebastian?
So great. Katie, thanks so much for having me on.
Of course. Thank you so much, Sebastian, for stopping by and sharing your story with us today.
Absolutely. Happy to.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to dive in, learn more about you. And so, Sebastian, to kick us off, can you tell us where you grew up and how, if at all, was your childhood shaped by athletics?
Yeah. So I'm from Cheshire, Connecticut, which is a pretty small town in central Connecticut. Decent sized school, and really my childhood was based around sports. And on my street, so Chestnut Street, and anybody from Chestnut Street listening right now knows how it was. We would go outside and play, and Mom would have to call me in at night. I'd go scarf down macaroni and cheese on Sunday, then I'd go right back outside. So we had cracks in our street; those made our tennis courts. We had an artificial three-point line because there was grass growing between one of them. We made up our own games playing dodgeball on bikes, which I highly recommend, but also we caution wearing a helmet. We turned everything into a game, and it really built a lot of both the skill set, but also just kind of the competitive mindset that I had growing up.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Growing up around it, having kids in your neighborhood to play with. Did you invent any games of your own?
We had and this is also realizing as I look back, it's also kind of dangerous. We played in the dark. We
Sure.
played a freeze tag in the dark, which thinking back towards it could have been catastrophic if something had gone wrong, but we all made it out okay.
That's good. That's good. Freeze tag in the dark. Did anybody ever sustain injuries from playing that?
We had a basketball hoop to the head one time.
Ooh, that's good.
The details of that will remain disclosed, but it was a painful one for sure.
Man, I bet. But that's so great. I mean, having the opportunity to grow up with kids your own age, play with them, and just have being outside at your disposal, and then sports really fostering that love and that passion at an early age. And so, Sebastian, from that time, was there a specific sport, maybe it was in the dark freeze tag, that really took your heart and you wanted to go down that path specifically?
Actually, I grew up playing baseball and I swam.
Okay.
It was really the first two sports that I did, and it wasn't really until I started to get more into basketball and football. Football was late for me. So Cheshire's a pretty football-centric town. I started playing in fifth grade, and I had no background. So I remember going down to my friend's house when I was 10 years old, and I was trying to ask his dad. I said, "Hey, how do I put my pads in?" I had my hip pads, my knee pads, and everything was out of whack. And it wasn't until I started playing in fifth grade, and it was really the first sport that I took to because, frankly, I was naturally really good at it. I was, my first game, I remember I didn't quite know what a touchdown was. So I was playing quarterback. They gave me the ball because I was fast. I knew how to dodge people. That whole freeze tag in the dark came in handy.
Sure.
and I scored my first touchdown. I didn't know which line to run past, so I just ran back through the back of the end zone, which was down a hill. So your boy finished like 30 yards past what the whistle indicated. But it was the first sport that I kind of naturally gravitated towards, that I was actually pretty good at from the start.
I mean, better safe than sorry, right? Just keep running. If you don't know where to stop, just keep going.
A little bit of Forrest Gump for sure.
Right,
yeah.
exactly. Just like Forrest Gump. So from there, Sebastian, I mean, when you, I guess, learned that you had that natural aptitude for football and really started to like it, did you at fifth grade started to focus in only on football, or did you still swim? Did you still play baseball?
Yeah, I still played a bunch. I played baseball up through my freshman year of high school.
Okay.
Played basketball through my senior year of high school. I played basketball like I played football, which means there was a ball on the floor. I tried to treat it like a fumble. I wasn't the most graceful basketball player. I actually think I'm better now than I was then. But really, my sophomore year of high school was when I decided that, hey, this is something that I really want to do, and I really want to lean into and go fully into. It was my sophomore year that I made that mental switch of like, yep, college is my next step here.
And what made you decide that? What made you to see, okay, I want to see how far I can take this sport. College is the next step for me.
It wasn't until my junior year of college. I was in an internship at the McChrystal Group, and General Stanley McChrystal was briefing out some of the interns, and he said, hey, I realized after I left the military, he was a 4-star that came up through the Army. Mm-hmm. And he said, it wasn't until I got back out of the military and I realized how much I wanted to be part of a team. Right. I loved being part of a team. I didn't care what team that was. So he created his own, and he created his own company, his own organization. And for me, that was the first time that really so deeply resonated with me around, for me, football is this extension of family. And for me, it's the epitome of what team and teamwork is. I think it's the ultimate team sport. And I've had multiple arguments around this. And I come back to every time, there's no other sport, at least, relatively civilized sport, that the health and wellness of somebody else can be in your hands at any given moment. If I don't do my job, my quarterback might get hurt. And that might be a direct one-on-one impact because I didn't do something or did do something, right? Yeah. So I go back to the responsibility of team. I always have leaned so heavily into being part of an organization or being part of a team. And I think that's what really, really kept me and really solidified what football was for me.
Wow. That is really powerful. I mean, to think about, you're right, you are responsible, or if you mess up or something happens, you could have directly impacted another one of your teammates, whether it was your role to protect them or do something in a play, because it is that, I mean, inherently a contact sport.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, other sports like basketball and rugby, lacrosse in a lot of ways, they have those similar aspects. Mm-hmm. But I've really kind of dug into it. I've just done a lot of observation. And like, there's nothing quite, there's really not as much of a violent game. You've got gladiators basically running around a football field. And there's not that one-to-one correlation of, if I don't do my job, I have your heart in my hands. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's something really powerful about that.
There really is. And I mean, having that mindset too, I mean, one, the discipline that playing football, being an athlete brings, but then two, that mindset of, okay, I'm not doing this just for myself. I'm doing this for my teammates. And there's, having that direct impact, based upon how you play or what you've done in a certain play on the field. And so, Sebastian, when you made that decision of, I want to see how far I can go, I want to go to college to play football, did you know what you wanted to do next? Did you only have your eyes set on football? Did you see, I want to try and go pro after college? Or did you have your eyes set on another career too?
You know what? The one thing that's very consistent across kind of my entire childhood in my adolescence was, I always wanted to be the best at where I was then. Right. And I can like look back at that and be pretty proud about how I played the game. And I don't really have any nostalgia or regrets around, how I played or do I want to go back. I'm really proud of how I played. I played really hard when I was in the moment. I gave it my all. I did my best. And for me, it was always about being the best high school player I could be. Right. Let me be the best high school player I could be. And then when I got to college, hey, let me be the best college player I can be. My junior year, I did step back and I said, okay, what do I want to do? And do I want to try to make a run at this? And I had already kind of had a number of injuries. I was, I've had a mediocre college career. And my junior year, I really stepped back and I said, hey, I think I do want to make a run at this. And I thought about the NFL. I did a little bit of kind of training for it. I did some of the assessments and the testing. But at the same time that, about a year later, I found something that kind of equally filled me up. And I'm happy to get into that in a little bit as well.
And so your junior year then, Sebastian, when that happened, what was it that had that mindset shift of, okay, I have to make a decision of, I want to go all in with football, or I want to make a transition, or a mental transition at least? What happened there?
The experience that happened, it was kind of twofold. One, I tore my ACL my senior season.
Ooh,
so
wow.
There was something, an injury for me, especially in my college career. Injury was a really important pillar that I've now based my life on. There's a lot of experiences that I go back to, and I'm a better person because I was able to go through, which as an athlete, very traumatic identity experience, right? There's a huge identity shift mentally, physically, emotionally about what I thought I could do before is actually not who I am and what I'm capable of right now. And rationalizing that took a lot for me. I'm better for it.
Yeah.
Now, my injury my senior year was one big one, but also my senior year, I reached back out to my high school football team. And I said, hey, coach, I'd love to share some of the work that I'm doing right now around emotional intelligence, around leadership, around sports psychology with some of the current players. Would that be okay? And he said, absolutely, come on in. And it was in the first moment that I was really facilitating a larger group, doing some presentation, doing some speaking. I got the same rush in that moment as I did on Saturdays on game day. And that was like, wait a minute, there's something to pay attention to here.
Wow.
And that was also something that I was able to realize. And I said, okay, there's something I got to pay, I got to pursue this a little bit more. And what am I tapping into? That was another kind of calling for me to step out of, wait a minute, there's other things that can fill me up other than just putting pads on Saturday.
And that's a huge realization to have at that time. I mean, in the kind of the coming towards the end of your football career, but then finding already something that could potentially fill you up even more so, or at least in the start, equivalently to what football was doing. And so, Sebastian, were you studying sports psychology at school? How did this emotional intelligence leadership talk? Why was that something you decided to reach out to your high school college, or your high school football coach for?
Yeah. Big shout out to Brian Kane. Brian Kane is a mental performance coach and sports psychologist. He does incredible work across the country with a lot of college teams. In my sophomore year, he came in and worked at Yale football. So I'm sitting in the front row, and this guy comes in. He comes parading in, big energy, big everything, right? Big personality. And he starts to teach, right? And as I was sitting there in class, I was a major in psychology. And I was thinking, wait a minute. That connects to what I was learning in the classroom. Okay, that's how the brain science is now working. Okay, wait a minute. This is really application of what I was learning in the classroom. This is so cool. And I had this moment of like, I could actually see myself doing something like this. And that was kind of the initial seed for me to think about, okay, what other experiences can bring this type of thing forward? And it was really in that session with Coach Kane that I started to lean into a little heavier into applied or performance psychology. And that was really the first exposure I had to it.
Wow. And so do you thinking back, know why that resonated so much with you? I mean, that focus in on psychology and the mental side of sport?
It's always been people.
Yeah.
When I was in middle school, I actually really wanted to be a therapist. Wow. I love to listen to people's problems, and I love to be able to help and give them advice and so on and so forth. When I got into college or high school, I was like, wait a minute, that seems really heavy, right? But at the same time, I'm deeply passionate, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of watching other people grow. I love, going back and serving in terms of being a coach for junior football. And I just love the idea of teaching and being able to support other people in that. So it made a lot of sense for me, from a sport perspective. It gives me this experience and platform of something that I already know really well, right? Sports and being a part of that team environment.
Right. And
then adding this layer in of actually, how do we make everybody around us better by focusing on leadership, by focusing on sports psych and where we are at mentally.
Wow. I mean, and it is kind of amazing that you have had that trend through your whole life. So it's working with people, wanting to see people succeed, but then over time having it kind of shift as you learn more, experienced more of your sport, experience more of life. That mold of how I want to help people then started to, I guess, take shape until it fully formed into what it is today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great read. And, it's actually never something that I stepped back entirely and thought about, that narrative that you just pulled around kind of service of and support of other people. It's a great call out.
Yeah. I mean, and it's your story. I mean, you lived it, it's amazing to have seen that play out. And so Sebastian, for you then coming up on your senior year, sustaining injury, but then too, having that moment of speaking with student athletes and realizing this is something that could fulfill me just as much as playing on Saturday does. Coming up on graduation and the completion of your football career, even though you had this thing on your heart now that you wanted to help people in this new way that you had found, was it still difficult navigating that transition of my football career is over and I need to figure out what to do next?
I had a little bit of direction already. So really at the end of my senior year, I started an LLC. So I started my own business.
Wow.
About 5 years ago. I said, I know that I'm going to be doing this at some point. I'm making a little bit of money working with teams right now. Let me put a structure around it because I know it's going to come in handy one day. So there's been kind of over the last few years, there's been this banking and by say banking, not from a financial standpoint, but from a getting ready standpoint, learning how to use the system or learning how to send out the proposal, all of those things that come with learning how to start and run a business. I've kind of been banking those things, and I already have a lot of those things when I really started to do this full time. So at the end of my senior year, I was also committed and ready and excited to go back on full time at McChrystal Group. So I interned there my junior season or junior semester, and then was coming back on full time as well. And I knew that was a place that I was going to be comfortable and happy and learn and grow a lot.
Wow. And so, I mean, you had that set up and you really did know what you wanted to do next. And so this LLC, was it the Sebastian Little Performance?
It was, correct. Yep.
So it's been, really great that you knew at that time, okay, this is something I'm going to make it a business. So I'm going to take this chance on myself because I know I'm going to grow it into something, into what I want it to be someday. And so at that time, you had Sebastian Little Performance, started to grow it. Can you walk us through, I guess, the journey then? So from when you started with the LLC to where you are now with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So my senior year of college, I started working with Cheshire football, and we did a number of sessions. We kind of put a program together. Then I did Cheshire softball, and then I did Cheshire baseball and basketball and lacrosse and a bunch of other sports in Cheshire, which was awesome to be able to kind of get back. And frankly, most of those I was not charging. It was like, hey, here's great experience. Here's me being able to get back to a town that's given so much to me. And then I started working with some other. I worked with New Canaan football. I worked with Guildford baseball, who I'm actually still very close with the coach now, and a number of other kind of other high school teams. Started doing some keynotes as well. So some middle schools and some high schools were like, oh, can you take this leadership and performance message and can you put it in the classroom? I said, yeah, frankly, whether it's sport classroom, whether you're training to be an Olympian or in the first chair in the orchestra, doesn't really matter. Like we're talking performance and we're talking leadership.
Yeah.
So I started kind of, just kind of figuring out who was interested in pursuing it that way. And never had it been about money. At this point, obviously it's a career, so you have to be able to generate something. But really for the first 3 to 4 years, it was all about how do I create relationships and how do I to generate the most diverse experience I can have. So after I graduated, I actually started working with Central Volleyball. It's a small D3 school, a volleyball team out in Iowa. And there was a connection based on somebody who I met overseas on a vacation, just kind of a small world.
Yeah.
And it was the first college team that I worked with. And there was this huge imposter syndrome that when I showed up to the girls, one, I'm working with a college girls team, really academic, really smart, right? Are they going to push me? Are they going to grill me? Like all these things, right? And then volleyball, and I knew nothing besides bump, set, spike, which is completely the wrong verbiage, right? I knew nothing about the game. And Jeannie Zapri, just, tip of the hat to her for trusting me to come in. And I don't know what she saw in me at that time, but I started working with Central Volleyball, and it was kind of my entrance into now starting to work with college teams. Wow. So I've worked with a number of college and high school teams at this point, and then I've had some touch points with a few professional teams as well. And it's just been, both through McChrystal Group and then also through my own work as well. It's been a really fun ride.
Wow. And so now is Sebastian Little Performance, is that your full-time job?
It is the full-time gig right now. As of the end of June. So you're getting me fresh off the press.
Oh, that's great. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And too, I think it's a real testament. Like you said, it took a couple of years to really get it off the ground. It took time building those relationships and fostering those and just taking chances, working with a collegiate women's volleyball team, which is a sport and a gender that you didn't know a lot about as far as helping them, guide them in that sport. So then just taking those opportunities, seeing what you could do. And so, Sebastian, I wonder when you first started and like you said, building those relationships and sometimes not really making money doing it, just trying to, build the name, build the brand. How did you eventually then make that transition to I'm building relationships, I'm not going to charge a lot or I'm not going to charge anything to I'm going to start charging for these services that I'm providing?
I had on the whiteboard written up here before, the value you are is the value that you bring. And what I realized is that eventually I was going to a point I said, hey, I really know what I'm talking about, right? So at McChrystal Group, we talk about organizational performance and leadership. We do leadership consulting. And I was in this space surrounded by Navy SEALs and Marines and people that were brilliant people from the private sector and academia. And I just was like, hey, wait a minute. I'm bringing a tremendous amount of value to this individual or to this space right now. What does that look like in terms of compensation? And I've actually had to really train myself on asking for money, right? There's an entire kind of relationship that all of us have to money, whether we have a hard time asking for it or whether we have a hard time giving it. And for me, it's actually been, I can give money pretty easily. There's mom and grandma taught me how to be pretty generous, but asking for it and being able to stand in my own worth, it's much more of a conversation around self-worth than is really around my relationship with money. It's about saying, hey, I know what I'm capable of bringing. I know what the impact that I can make on your team and your space in just a couple of hours. Here's how much I'm worth. Here's a dollar figure on it, right?
Yeah.
That took some time. Absolutely took some time.
Was it something that kind of triggered within you one day, or was it just over time realizing I know what I'm talking about, I have value, and I need to start showing that I'm valuable enough to be paid to do this?
There was I'd say, to actually put a moment on it, there was probably a time where the time that I was putting into something wasn't worth the same growth opportunity I was getting out of it. Right now, there's growth in every single opportunity. We can go down that path another time, but I had enough reps. I put my hours in. I had put my time in, and if I was going to go do something, it wasn't like I was getting this tremendous kind of things back from it. Besides the intrinsic motivation of loving what I do.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to travel someplace, it's going to take me 5 hours to travel. We're going to be on in the classroom for 2 to 3 hours, and then we're going to go back for another 5 hours. Wait, that's you're talking 24 to 48 hours of my time. Wait a minute, like that should be worth something. And I think when I started to rationalize, we're not just going down the street back to Cheshire, Connecticut, 30 minutes away. This is actually a significant investment in starting to shape up into my professional world.
Yeah.
If this is going to be a profession versus a hobby, I got to figure out what is the amount that I should be getting paid for this.
That is a really good point, because I think that's something, I think that really is a key thing that people struggle with, especially if you're trying to be an entrepreneur, starting something. It's, well, no, I like doing this, and but you hit the nail on the head. It's that value and your worth. It's how much is your time worth? How much are you worth? And at some point, if you've done it enough, you have to turn it from that side hustle, that passion, into a full-time gig, if that is your goal. And then you have to, like you said, realize intrinsically that you are worth it. You are valuable enough to do that.
And Katie, I want to double tap that point. I think it's a great call out. And one of the things I'm really working through now, as I'm starting to really be more assertive in my pricing, is you're not just paying for the time that I'm there. You're paying for all the times that I've been there before.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
You're not just paying for the hour-long keynote. I'm not just paying you right now for, and I'm just making this up, for an hour-long interview. I'm paying you for 27 interviews before this that got you to the place that allows you to be, a total kick-ass interviewer.
Wow. That's really powerful. Man, that's like, that really, I mean, it makes you think, because it's not just the value in that single hour. It's what brought you to this hour, what brought you here. And the journey you took, man. Well, Sebastian, I mean, you clearly it's your keynote, and you have a bunch of different things that you do under the umbrella of Sebastian Little Performance. So can you talk a little bit about all those different verticals and the different things that you offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So coaching, consulting, and speaking. Those are kind of the three different buckets, with coaches, with athletes, and with teams, around the topics of human performance and leadership. And those are kind of the different places and buckets that I play in. From a coaching standpoint, I'm really trying to serve athletes in transition. So how do athletes progress from high school to college, making that decision, that critical decision? When they're there, what's the psychology that needs to shift around who they're being and how they're showing up that allows them to be successful? Really mental performance work. And then in the back end, I'm actually currently building some program right now with a couple of colleagues around the college to career transition. Something that you and I both really kind of work through, pretty intensely. Not only about who I am, but also identifying your values and your strengths, right? So when you're coming out of this place, as a society tells us we should be humble, and what humility means in our society means that we're going to dim our light to make everybody else feel comfortable around us.
Yeah.
And what I've learned so far in this entrepreneurial journey, I'll come back to your original question in a second.
Yeah.
What I've learned so far in this entrepreneurial journey is that if I can't recognize the places that I burn brightest, my biggest strengths, frankly, I'm not going to last very long, because no one's going to pay me to do what I'm mediocre at.
Yeah.
It's been a wonderful survival mechanism that I've had to really, really learn around. What am I uniquely good at? Facilitating, asking powerful questions, thinking in systems, communicating, authentically connecting. Can pretty much connect with a first grade group as easily as I can connect with a senior executive group. I've done both. And if I can't recognize and talk you through those superpowers that I have, who am I to show up to a space and be able to own my own authenticity, right? To have my own self-awareness.
Yeah.
So anyway, coaching, right? So coaching, and really in a one-to-one, I'm trained actually and certified as a life and leadership coach. And really what that does is it gives me a template to be able to talk about, hey, let's talk about our relationship with money. Let's talk about our relationship with time. Let's talk about our relationship with relationships and team and all these different things that kind of come up in our lives. And as an athlete, typically we think about what's happening on the field. And what's been wonderful about the past year of being able to work in this work has been, no, let's talk about, let's talk about what's happening on the field. Let's also talk about what's happening when the lights turn off, because that's oftentimes what sets you up to be successful on the field.
Right.
So that's kind of the coaching work. The workshop and the keynoting has been a really, really, really fun thing as well. I'm really starting to build some more topics right now, things around like hypermasculinity, hegemonic masculinity, diversity and inclusion, which I think is just such an important topic right in the world that we're in right now.
Yeah.
And then some kind of other playful topics like burnout. I guess I shouldn't use play and burnout in the same word, but they're really opposites, right? How do we create more play in our lives, and how do we actually combat burnout? I think so many people, and frankly, young professionals are, on the grindstone. And again, society tells us we got to work.
Mm-hmm.
How do we actually pull ourselves out of that and really find more joy and more play in our lives? So I'm working that practice personally, and I think it's something that I'd love to continue to workshop.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the suite of things that I'm up to right now and things that I'm building and really working on.
And I mean, that's amazing, just the breadth of what you're doing. And they're all, of course, related, because it's all related to what you're doing under the with what you're skilled at and what you're good at. But two, it's just going down so many different verticals. And I like what you said too, you can present it to work with kindergartners as well as work with C-suite level people. It's your knowledge and your worth and your value and your ability to communicate that and communicate to whatever group you're speaking with those different experiences and how to best combat or go after whatever it is that they're going after. And so, Sebastian, for you now, with everything that you're doing with Sebastian Little Performance, and of course the fact that, as full-time as of June, which is amazing, where do you see Sebastian Little Performance going?
You are asking the exact question that I'm asking right now. What I've realized recently, and I've had a few just really close friends reach out and say, hey, would you want to go and do XYZ at this sports organization? And I thought a lot about, working at the professional level. And I'm so honored and so kind of humbled by them thinking of me in that space. And I also, what I've come to realize that I didn't have this awareness a few months ago was, no, I'm super excited to be kind of a little bit everywhere right now. I can do this coaching thing. I can do this keynote thing. I can do, and I get to really create what I want to create. And it's really life by design right now. And for the near term, I'm just really excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm super, super present to the potential and the possibility that comes with being able to really live your life by design. So for the near term, that's what I'm pursuing. What I do want to build, and what I know that I eventually want to do, is I really want to lead formally. I've done a lot of informal leadership and, a lot of peer-to-peer type work and a lot of leading up. There's a point, and there's something that I've always wanted around being around the title, around the whatever else, but being in a position where I actually have an organization of people around me. And I think that's something that I'm going to be building in the next really probably 5 to 10 years will probably be when I start to really scratch that itch around that more formal leadership. Yeah.
So is that then you want to grow the organization so that you have employees, you have people working with you and helping you?
I'm going to give you another non-answer here, Katie.
Go for it.
A really good friend and a boss of mine just started a completely new field. He just started in private equity, non-profit private equity, which frankly I didn't know existed before he told me this.
Yeah.
And he was former military, worked at McChrysler Group with me, and I said, hey, do you have any experience in private equity or finance? He said, nope. I said, wait a minute. Why? And he said it was because it was one field that I didn't know much about, and I wanted a challenge. I wanted to do something different.
Wow.
And I could see myself very easily having a similar response at some point in my future, where I realized, hey, this is what I'm doing right now is great, and I want to go chase something new.
Wow.
And I don't know what that looks like. I've thought about real estate before. I've thought about a marketing agency before. But for right now, it's it's me, and I'm excited to kind of build myself right now and build, the life that I want.
Yeah.
And if there's a point in which we start to do more work and we need to start to scale, I'm so open to that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also open to changing paths and taking what I've learned here and applying it in other places.
I love that. I mean, thinking that at some point you could make a shift. I mean, still doing and being passionate about what you love to do now, but then making a shift into something that maybe you never even thought about before, because it's something that sparks your interest. And so, but then too, it plays into you have to be open enough to do that. You have to be willing to step through those doors. And that's just a whole nother level of overcoming mental obstacles and struggles. And like you said, the imposter syndrome that can just really settle in.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that as well too, like there's also a tremendous amount of ego, right?
Yeah.
You get really, really good or really expert in doing one thing, and then all of a sudden you throw a curveball, and frankly, everybody else around you is surprised that that you're trying to play a different game, right? MJ went over and started playing baseball, and everybody threw their hands up and were shocked, right? He was up on top.
Yeah.
The thing about the MJ and I'm by no means comparing myself to MJ.
It's okay if you are. It's fine.
MJ was a player no matter what game he played.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes what I loved about The Last Dance and how he got portrayed was that whether it was baseball, whether he was throwing quarters, in the locker room with his support staff, he cared more about how he played the game. And when I say game here, game was life.
Yeah.
And I think so many times we put people into the game of what we know them in. We put people into the baseball box. Well, that's the game they play. No. Like, we're players no matter where we step on or off the field. It's just how we choose to play.
Mm-hmm.
And I think taking that metaphor and applying it to business is just it's when you start to see those kind of mogul entrepreneurs or serial entrepreneurs where they really just want to continue learning and growing because they enjoy the process of building, the game of building. It doesn't really matter in what arena or in what industry.
Wow. That is really powerful. And I think too, it's that inherent link between entrepreneurship and being an athlete too, because you have that mindset, that discipline to do that, to be a successful entrepreneur. But then it's too diving into, well, this interests me and I just want to try it out. I just want to see what I can do with it. And so it's really diving down those different paths. I like that a lot. That's a very insightful thing, very thought provoking. Because I mean, at any given time, you could be interested by any one thing. And so rather than thinking, oh, it could just be a side thing or something I'm passionate about, why not try and turn it into something instead?
Yeah, I've always thought about, and I've recently come to this metaphor. If you haven't noticed, I like to play in different metaphors.
I like it.
I thought a lot about. I've always worked best when I have 2 to 3 balls in the air. Mm-hmm. Right, when I'm working full time at McChrystal Group and I'm volunteering at an organization and I'm building out Sebastian the performance and doing some stuff on the side. I'm always going to be better because it keeps me interested in the main thing. Right?
Yeah. Wow.
And when you're kind of starting running a business, and even when I'm starting to lay out some of the things that I got going on, even having different sub projects within the main line allows me to keep playing and keep juggling multiple things. And what I've thought about recently is instead of juggling, what if we were all painters? What if we were all actually artists and we had a blank canvas and every single day we had a canvas? And instead of the 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 balls that some of us choose to juggle on any given day, there's this constant pressure and there's anxiety around dropping one. What if instead of jugglers, we were actually all artists? And those 7 to 8 balls you've got going, being a son, being a brother, being a sister, being a teammate, being an athlete, all of those hats you're wearing, what if they actually just added more color to your palette, right? Now we have 8 colors to paint from versus 8 balls we're juggling. And what happens when we're able to actually integrate those different parts of us? And I think, again, as an athlete, like, we oftentimes think of ourselves in this one bucket or silo. But when we are able to diversify the color palette that we look at our lives in, the masterpiece we can create on our blank canvas every day is just so much more beautiful.
Man. Have you written your book yet? Because if you haven't, you should write your book with all these metaphors. Every chapter could be titled with a different metaphor that you've come up with. Seriously.
I will cite you as the source of this idea. Give me a year or so, and I'll get some out to you.
Good. Okay. Cool. I'll be the first reader. I'm serious though, because you have such great insight and knowledge. I mean, and having been 4 to 5 years into your business, but then too having the wherewithal to see, like, okay, I can go down different paths and you have a very high awareness of yourself. And it's cool because it translates into a lot of athletes who are listening, myself included. I mean, being able to reflect and think about your own athletic journey and how it brought you to where you are today, and maybe your interest in different areas. So it's very, very interesting. So yes, I'll be waiting for your book. What would you title it if you released a book?
Oh man, you're gonna put me right in the spot.
Yeah, you'll come up with it. I know it.
So I have one book title called "How Not to Suck at Your First Job."
There you go. I like that.
And for the first 100 days of my time at McCrory Group, I wrote one basically mini post to myself around something that I either sucked at or that I did well for my first 100 days. So loosely, that would be one title. I don't know what I call this other kind of more creative masterpiece title though, but I'll work on that and get back to you.
Yeah, definitely do. And that could be obviously like the preface, or a couple chapters in your book is your journey and how you sucked at your first job. That's great. Love it. I love it.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. Well, Sebastian, you've clearly led an incredibly successful life, and knowing that you're leading that life now, looking forward, you're going to accomplish everything you set your mind to, including writing a book. But I just have one final question that I ask all of my interviewees. What do you want to be remembered for?
Recess. Oh, that was on the tip of my tongue. I'll give you a quick side. So about a year ago, actually through my coaching program, they said, okay, so what's your life purpose? And I smirked because I had my grad school answer ready.
Yeah.
And I said, I want to shift the way leaders and teams and organizations show up and perform in the workplace. And they're like, oh my God, great. And for me, that was just a super meaningful thing. I've iterated on some of these things before. And it just means that I want people to show up authentically, and I want them to perform really well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Leaders, cultures, team performance.
Yeah.
And they looked at me and they're like, oh, good try. No. What's possible when teams show up and perform at their best? And I said, oh man, I didn't have an answer for this one. And I had to really go deep, and we started to kind of poke and ask questions about it. I said, honestly, like, people can have fun. Like I'm a goofball. I just finished watching, a Nickelodeon series. I still quote SpongeBob. Like, I've got superhero, figurines in my room.
Yeah.
I love to have a great time, and I love to enjoy what I'm doing when I'm doing it. It's part of the reason why I love what I do, is because oftentimes I just find people that are wonderful doing it. And they said, okay, so what does that look like when people are having fun and they're fully self-expressed? I said, well, it's like recess. It's like you go outside, you watch 3rd and 5th graders run around playing freeze tag and kickball. Like, there's no more joy than watching people exist in their natural habitat doing what they love. I love watching dancers dance. I just watched Hamilton, and
yeah.
I got my hair stood up because I just love to be able to see actors act.
Yep.
And I define recess as creating spaces for full self-expression and play. And I think you can do that through the lens of leadership, of team performance, of culture, of these other things that I find really important. So what I want to be remembered for? I want to be remembered for recess, play, and creating those spaces for people to do so.
Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. To learn more about our guest, check out the show notes at keepmovingforward.us. While you're there, go ahead and subscribe to our newsletter to stay up to date on all things coming out of the KMF Collective Studio. Always remember, you can beat the odds and go the distance if only you keep moving forward.